Hail and well met, weebs and dice goblins. Are you having a nat 20 day? Because you deserve it. I am here to answer the question, what are the best One Piece arcs to play out in your D&D campaign? Why am I asking this question? Well, I think it's perfectly fine for you as a dungeon master to take familiar stories from pop culture and just put them in your D&D game. Just rip them off, steal them completely. Hollywood does this. Lion King is just Hamlet, Magnificent Seven, and 1,000 other movies are just Seven Samurai. So why not take from one of, I think, the best pieces of pop culture we have, One Piece, and take those little bits of stories, take away the specific characters and locations, strip it down to its narrative bones, and use that for D&D. So we're going to talk less about, my favorite fights and my favorite straw hats, and more about, is this a good dungeon? Do we establish a good boss? Is there things for the party to do as characters, not things happening around them and they have to sit there and passively look at it? This is not to be confused with just a generic One Piece ranking. If you are interested in my opinions there as the average One Piece enjoyer, well, I did go ahead and make that. This is what it looks like. You can check that out by pausing on it. I don't think I have very many hot takes other than really not liking post-war arc. So let's go to the D&D ranking. There is no F tier because this is One Piece we're talking about. If I think something is D tier, I don't think it's worth your time to transpose any at all of it into your D&D game. If something is C tier, I think, there's something there. There's some little creative nugget you can grow, but it's probably not worth your time. B tier is going to be like, it's an average D&D session. Your players are going to have a good time, but it's probably nothing to base a whole campaign around. If I think something is A tier, this is where I start to think, you can make a campaign out of this. S, it's going to be really good, and you don't have to work that hard to change it up from what Oda's already given us. And if I think something is GOAT tier, I kind of think you should go out right now and make your next D&D adventure out of it. Because I'm weird like that, and I can't watch or read something without thinking, I think that character just made a nat 20. I wonder what class that would be. And maybe you have that same Mind Flayer tadpole in your brain, so you'll find this interesting. If you want to read all of One Piece, but you haven't caught up through Waynoh country, there might be some mild spoilers, some soft spoilers. I'm not going to tell you how exactly Sanji dies, but the fact that I stopped talking about Sanji after Fishmen Island is going to tip you off. So if that is the kind of spoiler that you don't want, then maybe this isn't the best thing to listen through all the way. Just hop to the end and see my ranking. Other than that, have I said all my disclaimers and how weird this is? Yeah, I think so. Let's talk about what are good D&D adventures based on One Piece arcs, starting with Romance Dawn. Well, this is a very good backstory, but it's not really something that your party is going to play out at the table. I do think there's something to be said for, given little one-on-one sessions, just a player and a DM, seeing where they came from. But this is still going to be C. Let's get real. Orangetown. This sounds like a level 1 D&D adventure. You get the party together, you save somebody from being executed, you get a cat burglar, and now you're in a rundown town that is being run over by bandits, and you save them, and also there's a dog. What's not to love? Well, I don't know. There's nothing wow here, but it all works, so it's going to be a B. Syrup Village. We pick up a charlatan in the party, and there's another charlatan. He's on a long con to take over this island through manipulating the nobility. I actually think that Syrup Village as a campaign setup works better than reading Syrup Village. I think that the gimmicky fights with the cat crew, whatever, the nice little terrain that they have between the boat and the island, it all works. I actually think that Syrup Village gets you into A tier. Baratie is one of my favorite arcs, and I actually think it's a very good setup for D&D. You have this very insulated locale, you're getting people coming by on their shipwreck who you want to help, but if you help them, they're probably going to want to fight you. That's an interesting little quandary beyond just, hey, there's pirates, they're bad guys, go kill them. We also get the introduction of some outside world elements, so as we're leveling up our party and building it out, getting a chef on the team, because everyone needs somebody with that feat, right? I actually think this is... yeah, this is good. Is Baratie a S tier? It's a really good locale. I think it's still A. I'm going to put it in A. Alright, Arlong Park. This is the point where lots of people say One Piece starts getting good as a story, and I think this is also very, very good for a D&D setup. You have multiple locales on the island where you can go around and have little duels. There's some backstory to figure out, not only from one of your party members, but also just figuring out how long this warlord has been taking over this town and the toll that it has taken on the people. You have lots of little fights, whether it's the boss or all the mini-bosses. There's enough to go around for the whole party. Arlong Park is really good in One Piece, and I think it's also really good in D&D. Let's put it in S tier. Loguetown. So it's time for your party to go shopping, and they're going to meet some town guards, and they're going to try to execute somebody. It's actually very D&D friendly now that I think about it, but is there that much of a wow factor, that much interesting that happens? No, I don't think so. I'm going to put it in B tier right here with Orangetown. And now we start getting into some major magical world building with Reverse Mountain. There's an interesting skill test to be had with how to climb up a mountain. Maybe your party isn't doing it on a boat and completely breaking physics, but hey, breaking physics is a time-honored D&D tradition. So, why not? You get to meet a whale. Everybody loves an animal companion that your players get way too attached to. Why not? There's not a lot for your party to do. There's not really a fight, but, especially if you're not playing a combat-heavy D&D session. Well, no, wait. You have to fight the Baroque Works faction who is in there trying to kill Laboon or something. It's been a while since I've read these chapters, but I think it's a pretty good D&D setup. There's still some work to be done, and I'm thinking about it enough that it's probably going to be top of B tier. Whiskey Peak. It's time for your party to stay at an inn, and oh no, the inn is actually run by bandits, and the whole town is bandits, and now you gotta fight them. It's a big old fight, which isn't the worst thing in the world. It can be a good little fight. There's some nice terrain going on between fighting on the rooftops and the mountains. There's some PvP happening. I don't know. I think this is B tier. I think it works, but it's nothing special. Drum Island. I don't like this arc very much, but when I think about it in D&D terms, like, we have the oppressive environment, you start getting into the town wanting to rebel against their king, who is literally in a castle on top of a mountain. The villain, Wapple, is not very good in One Piece villain terms, but in D&D terms, like, he has a fun little gimmick with eating stuff and spitting it back out as weird construct creations, kind of an artificer villain. And there's reindeer, there's a werebear. Yeah, this is where One Piece gets into some serious lycanthropy, doesn't it? I actually think Drum Island works better as a D&D arc than it does as a One Piece story, and I'm gonna put it... I can't do S. I think there's more there to work with than Baratie, so let's put it in A tier. Little Garden. Well, we meet some giants who are also Vikings, and that's very D&D friendly, isn't it? We wind up getting captured by the Baroque Works faction that has been dogging our party all this time. They have to break their way out of wax in a puzzle with a ticking clock on it, and then there's still some fighting to do. The environment is cool and different. Is this an S tier? This might be an S tier. Well, does it have wows going on? Maybe not with the whole wax thing. No, I'm going to keep it in low S tier is probably where that's going to stay. Alabasta. Wow, so I think I had this in my GOAT tier just rating One Piece, and I think it's going to stay in GOAT tier for D&D. There's a lot of intrigue going on. The villains are very cool, especially your boss villain who, you can kind of use mummy stats for, or mummy lord stats. Lots of environmental challenges, lots of skill checks. Your party gets captured at some point. We start getting into magical items with sea stone. Wow. Yeah, Alabasta still holds up. It's a GOAT. That's where it's going to stay. Jaya, it's another our party goes into town, stays at an inn, and maybe does some shopping. There's some more bandits for them to fight. They start getting some good lore about the next place that they're going to go, so I guess that's pretty good. But as I'm describing this, it sounds pretty run-in-the-mill. It's going to be B tier, but there's a little more going on than Whiskey Peak, and Loguetown has maybe too much going on, because you get the Marines, you get this dragon NPC. Who's he? I'll put it above Loguetown, but keep it below Orangetown, because that's the perfect little level 1 adventure. Skypeia. So, we have a god, or a proclaimed god. That's very classical in our D&D tropes. He's got a lot of cleric NPCs that we can fight. There's kind of the tribal people that are trying to take over the land once again, as well as the town of angel folk, ASMRs, I guess, who have their dial technology. Again, even if we remove all the specifics of One Piece, there's a whole lot going on here where while the party is fighting, they're also traversing through this mysterious island, learning about the history of the land that matters a lot to this one NPC. And we get to fight a god. The set piece with the pyramid and the giant bell. At one point, there's also a knight riding by on like a pelican or something. I forget that character. One Piece has so many characters. Don't blame me for not remembering all of them. Skypeia. Wow. I think this is a GOAT. I think this is an absolute GOAT for One Piece. We'll see if I move that. Long Ring, Long Land usually winds up in people's D-list for One Piece stories. However, here's the thing. Your party gets to fight in a way that isn't necessarily deadly. They get to show off some skills. You can team them up in interesting ways. I think the Davy backfight mechanic of being able to say, well, you lost round 1, so we're going to take one of your party members now. They belong to the villain faction. Actually is some very nice stakes for a D&D adventure. And then you wind up teasing a boss villain with an ice dragon coming on by. Long Ring, Long Land, not the best One Piece arc, but I think it's a very good D&D adventure. My parties love fun stuff like this. I think it's S tier, right above Little Garden. Water 7, hey, we're going on a city session again. We're going shopping. We might have to fix our boat. That's some increased stakes. The city structure, as well as kind of, the way they are subservient to the world government, but sometimes work outside of those laws is interesting. We've lost Baroque Works as a faction, but now we're bringing in CP9. We have a Venice-like city where everybody wears masks. That's kind of cool. We fight the Frankie house. There's once again some PvP, lots of different themes going on. Yeah, Water 7 is one of the best One Piece arcs, and I think there's some good bones there for a D&D adventure. It is still going to be a town session, not really an out-and-about exploration session, so I don't think it's a GOAT, but I think it's an A tier. Once again, I like Baratie, but I think there's more going on than Baratie, so we'll put it here. Enies Lobby. Well, let's see. The Enies Lobby itself is kind of like a dungeon, the way it's set up. Your party has to come in on a train, on the sea train. You have to break down the gate. There's some prisoner NPCs you can rescue and get along for the journey, but by the end, it's going to be your party squaring off in one-on-one 2v2 fights with CP9, who has a really good boss villain, Were-Tiger NPC. And you're fighting the government and sending a symbolic message. This is... yeah. I mean, Enies Lobby is a GOAT here. I'm not sure if it makes the GOAT tier as a D&D adventure. I think there might be a few too many enemies and NPCs going on, and that is certainly a problem that I've seen a lot of DMs and certainly published D&D adventures come across. I'm gonna keep it at the top of S. Post Enies Lobby. Well, there's not much going on here. This is basically a lore dump. I think this would be, maybe not something you want to sit down for a session with at a table. I think this is something that you can get on y'all's Discord forum. This is D tier, honestly. Wow. Thriller Bark. Some people love this arc, some people hate it. When we actually break it down, we have, once again, an insulated environment that is a hazard. We have lots of undead to fight. We have kind of a smaller resistance. This is actually one of the smallest resistance factions, which works better in your D&D game than having a whole resistance army like we saw in Alabasta. So I do like that a lot. There's a lot of easy D&D tropes in here. Your swordsman fighter squaring off to get a magical blade. We need our bard, who is also a skeleton. That's cool. Lots of flesh golems, giant fighting construct robot. Gecko Moria, not a very good One Piece villain, but a very good D&D villain. Especially all of his henchmen. Is Thriller Bark GOAT? Huh. You know what? Lots of people who play D&D have fought lots of zombies. So some of those swarms might get old after a while, and the flesh golems. Yeah, for the fact that we've kind of seen a lot of this before, but I think the environment and the traps work maybe better than Enies Lobby. I'm going to keep it at the top of S tier. Sabaody Archipelago, it's a shopping session. Sabaody Archipelago, it actually kind of seems like one of those D&D sessions that went wrong. Like, the DM is like, okay, guys, I'm going to introduce the world nobles, the celestial dragons, which you could make literal dragons, I guess. And you're like, guys, you can't touch these NPCs. Bad things will happen. And then, of course, your hot-headed fighter is like, LOL, I'm going to go punch one and see what happens. And then the DM is like, I guess I'm going to call on an admiral next session. Sure. Party freeing slaves at an auction. That has a very nice setup that can go a lot of different ways. Lots of rival NPCs coming in. Maybe too many, but I don't think too many. At that point, like, Kid and Law are the ones that actually do stuff. I'm getting too deep into One Piece. You get some fights, and there's another moment that's very, like, D&D horror story, where, like, so I'm the DM, and my party did all this bad stuff. They kept punching the Celestial Dragon nobles, so I sent in Bartholomew Kuma, who I gave a bunch of inevitable features on, and he was overpowered, so I decided instead of killing them, he just smacks them to a new island. It sounds like a D&D session gone wrong, but is that the best model for your D&D session that you want to go right? I think there's a lot that's good here, but it does do some stuff wrong. I think as a model, though, for kind of elevating those town sessions like our Loguetown and Jaya, I think this does a better job. So I'm going to keep it in high A. So then one of our party members has been smacked away to an island of women, and there's Medusas or Gorgons, whatever your version of D&D calls them. There's an arena fight, there's backstory for an NPC. Honestly, what we lose here is the party aspect of the Straw Hats are going to be the stand-in for your D&D party, and we don't really have the Straw Hats here, right? Now, I have had sessions where the party has split in such a way where it makes sense for us to make, like, B-team player characters and play as them for a while. But I don't think that's what we get in Amazon Lily. There's still some cool stuff going on. It's a cool environment. There's interesting politics. You get an arena fight, but it's a lot to work around. I'll put this above Romance Dawn. Impel Down. I know a lot of D&D adventures that have a jailbreak session or are just a big old jailbreak themselves, like Out of the Abyss. And come to think of it, I mean, Impel Down is a play on kind of the Dante version of hell. You have all the different levels that have different magical defenses and traps. You meet different NPCs from your past stories and have the quandary of, well, do you want to rescue this person to help you now? Or is what they did before so bad that you don't want to rescue them? Impel Down's really good, and unlike Amazon Lily, where I could kind of see putting in some B-team players, this is a spot where the party that Luffy gathers with Mr. Tubonclay and Buggy actually matter enough that I could see them being elevated to player characters, temporary player characters maybe. Impel Down is really good, and it's our first, dedicated dungeon in even more of a way than Enies Lobby and Thriller Bark was. Like, this is a dungeon. Or just a hell plane. This is really good for D&D. I think Impel Down is GOAT tier. Marineford. We all know that Marineford is pretty S tier or GOAT tier as far as One Piece goes. However, what I just talked about, I think that the most important thing to D&D is the party. And the party in Marineford gets a little muddled because the conflict is really between the Marines and the Whitebeard pirates, all these other factions that start coming up. And Luffy's still there. His party from Impel Down, I guess if we're continuing them, are still there. But there's just not much for them to do. They can stand in front of the army and make powerful main character statements about what's going on, but everybody knows that they're not able to hang with these, gods fighting dragons, fighting titans. Wow. Yeah, this is going to be a big break. I think that Marineford is a really cool One Piece story, but for a D&D game, I have seen too many games go wrong where DMs or the players even try to bring in armies and have these big battles in a way where we can't just hone in on our characters and what matters to them. So, gosh, I think it's still got cool moments. It's still an interesting environment with cool big-scale magical spells happening, like our ice dragon freezing the whole ocean. So there's stuff to learn from it, but is it a good D&D adventure? I don't think so. I'm actually I'll put it behind Amazon Lily. I think there's more to work with there. Post-war arc, we get into playing out a backstory of one of our characters in a way that I actually think is really cute. And I've had many sessions in D&D where we play out somebody's backstory and it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to be his childhood friend with some latent fire abilities and his other childhood friend who's a, noble paladin type. Okay. No, you can work with post-war. And it's a really good example of backstories. I'm going to keep it in C. I think this is an easier one-off session than Marineford is multiple sessions of, hey guys, look at my two armies smashing together like we're playing Warhammer. You just stand there. Yeah, so I'm actually going to put post-war ahead of Marineford. Something that I wouldn't think I would ever do. But this is a D&D tier list. All right, returning to Sabaody. So our A-team party has gotten back together. We've had a time skip. They're level 10 now, or level 12. We won't think about that too much. They're getting shopping. They're getting on their new boat. And we get to see all of their abilities. We have to fight a fake D&D party that has taken their identities. The more and more I think about this, the more fun I think it is as a one-off D&D session. And also you should incorporate more time skips into D&D to let your characters level up and do downtime. Wow, not my favorite One Piece arc, but I do think it's a very good D&D session. Is it better than Little Garden? No, and it's also not better than The Return? Is Return to Sabaody or just classic Sabaody better for D&D? I think it works better. I think Sabaody Archipelago has a lot of baggage. Wow, putting this ahead. I'm surprising myself here. This was, if it's not clear, this was not a planned session on my part, a planned YouTube session. This was very much improv. All right, let's talk about Fishmen Island. We got some royals. We got a villain faction that's trying to usurp the royals in this case. Kind of a subversion from the Alabasta, Skypeia style adventures we've been having. I think that works well for D&D. That's a good lesson. If you keep running through the same, okay, we beat the bad guy who's a bad king. We beat the bad guy who's a bad king. This is interesting. We get neat lore. There's some ship combat. I think taking bits and pieces of the magic of getting into a new world and what that means for your characters. There's a fortune teller NPC there. There's a princess who you have to guard. There's a mythical artifact that your archaeologist bard is going to figure out some lore for. Wow. I think Fishmen Island really works. It does come down to just a big old battle where it's basically your party against an army, but I think that's better than army versus army and your party is somewhere over here watching. Fishmen Island works. If I look back up here, I don't think it works as well and as tightly as Enies Lobby or Arlong Park. I don't think it's as fun as Long Ring Longland and the Davy Back fight. I think it's better than Little Garden. We'll keep it there in S tier. Punk Hazard. Not the most loved One Piece arc, but as a D&D adventure, you have a dynamic environment where it's all a threat. It's either super hot or it's super cold, or you're in the villain's dungeon and the villain has lots of gas poisons and a gaseous form. You fight a harpy, a boss harpy with snow powers. There are centaurs. There is a dragon, a real dragon that is actually a dragon and not a marine admiral that I'm calling a dragon. You're saving children from a dungeon. There's a mind switch, a mind flayer mind switcheroo of your party where they have to trade character sheets and play as each other. Huh. Punk Hazard is GOAT. Punk Hazard is GOAT tier D&D material. Is it better than Impel Down? Ooh, yes, because the villains on Punk Hazard are actually something you can fight, whereas Magellan on Impel Down is very clearly a DM saying, no, you can't beat the pit fiend boss of hell. You can't do it. Yep, surprising myself today. Punk Hazard, GOAT tier for D&D adventures. Dressrosa. We've gone to lots of islands where we have to fight a king. We've already gone through that, but we have a big arena fight where we can involve a lot of the party. There is a section of the very cosmopolitan island where our characters encounter fairies. There's fae. There's people getting turned into constructs. When you beat the NPCs, if you had high influence with them, they now help you get up to fight the boss. The boss has a ticking clock fight where he lets down a magical cage, a force cage, on you. The boss sets a bounty on your party members so that the NPCs have to go after you. Oh my gosh, is this GOAT tier? This is better than Alabasta. There's more going on, but every part works. And the only thing that didn't work in Dressrosa reading it was that sometimes it just took too long, or especially watching it. But you can control the time better in D&D? Top of GOAT. Dressrosa. Top of GOAT tier. Bonus points that I think Doflamingo is a very good model for a D&D villain that you can learn a lot from. And his faction is also pretty good too. Lots of different powers. Whole Cake Island. We have another magical world. I remember reading this and thinking, oh man, the forest of animated trees and things, but they're all trying to kill you, is so D&D, so D&D. We have a skill challenge where a party member who is also going through their personal backstory has to win the day not by kicking the villain, but by baking a really good wedding cake. Is this GOAT tier? We did have to do a party split, but that's because our party has gotten so large that not everybody can meet on Wednesday nights. Let's see. We have a big set piece. There's a few too many NPCs. We have a mirror world. We're doing some planar travel now that we're higher level in D&D characters. I think this one's actually really good, and you're not on a dungeon, but you're on a whole island that is controlled, and the populace that is controlled by the boss villain. I think Whole Cake Island is actually really, really good, and it has more going on as far as the magic and the whimsy that your D&D game maybe should be evoking than something like Enies Lobby or Arlong Park. Yeah, I think Whole Cake Island actually works very, very well. Wow, S tier. Zoe. Or is it Zoo? I don't know. I'm going with Zoe. I'm sticking with Zoe. So we have a magical environment on the back of an element. That's worth stealing on itself. I know, like, saying we can separate this from the One Piece world, but just there's a giant Titan mammoth walking around and there's a city on the back of it, and you should go check it out and protect it from the big boss pirate faction that was actually in charge of the Dressrosa guy. That's a big deal. We have to meet our furry race at some point in D&D. The Tabaxi enthusiasts gotta have a homeland. I think Zoe works really well. There's not other than the wow factor of just there's a city on the back of this Titan elephant. There's not that much going on. As much as the minks are fun, they're not that interesting as like a people. Is it A tier? I'm going to put this at like mid A tier for a D&D adventure. All right, almost there. So Reverie, these were super hype chapters. I love world building in One Piece. I love getting to go see what's going on, but it has the same problem as post Enies Lobby, where while it is hype, it's all stuff that's not happening to your characters, to your party. Is it something that you can lore dump as a DM on Discord and say, hey guys, go read this paragraph that I wrote. It's some cool lore. Respond to it. What do you think this NPC would do? That being said, where post Enies Lobby doesn't have a lot of actionable activities that you can take, I could see a mini session or a one-shot where you ask everyone to make a character that is a member of the Revolutionary Army, and then they go on this subterfuge mission. Yeah, the more I think about this, the more you have to work for it. So we're talking like B or C. But it's a really cool lore dump with all your nobles getting together and seeing what the opposing factions are. Oh, I think it's B. I think it's B. Like, it has the same problems as post Enies Lobby, but it has enough cool stuff to get an A tier, so I'm going to average it out. I'm going to put it in B. I actually really like that idea of having a one-shot where they play other characters who might live or die, but they will affect the rest of the world and eventually the main party. So that's really cool. Waynoh Country. We have multiple islands. Again, we have a prison break. There's a lot of stuff going on in Waynoh with magic items. There's a lot going on with the populace, in some places being taken over by major magical effects. The boss of Waynoh Country is a dragon that runs his own country, and you are helping an NPC faction fight against him with the red scabbards. There's enough for your whole party to do and express themselves. There's plenty of boss fights, which, you know, by this time your party's level 15, so you should be fighting just boss fight after army wave. There's Oni. There's a spot where you're... would Chopper be a cleric? No, he's a druid because he transforms and heals. There's a part where he has to use his medicine skill in the heat of combat in order to save a bunch of NPCs. The whole set piece of Onigashima is a dungeon that you have to fight through multiple layers, and it has its own map. There's a Drider. There's a Drider that's a boss, Black Maria. And one of your PCs turns into a demon at some point, and you're like, can you do that now? And they're like, I can do that now. I'm that level. Okay, cool. Everybody says it's cool. I think Waynoh Country is also GOAT tier. Is it better than all the cool arena fights in Dressrosa and the Force Cage and the Fae? Dressrosa has fairy people and Waynoh Country doesn't. Ooh, there's a Fae Fox though. That's just one. That's just one. Dressrosa has lots of little fairies. Okay, cool. So that's where I'm at. That is my One Piece tier list for stealing these ideas and these dungeons and these bosses and using it in your D&D game. I'm very interested in hearing if y'all have already tried something like this with One Piece. If you like this style of video, let me know, because there's certainly plenty of other pieces of pop culture that I can apply this to. And if you haven't already, check out my video for Can You Play D&D in One Piece, where we look at the setting of One Piece rather than just the story structure. That's about all I got, y'all. Please, I hope your next D&D game is amazing, and have a nat 20 day.